Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Maserati Guy. Today I thought I'd give you an update on the CL500, in particular the head unit upgrade, and it's a cautionary tale really, because I've actually abandoned it. To cut a long story short, I've actually abandoned the head unit upgrade at this stage. It was just turning out to be too difficult. And I'll tell you a little bit about it because it might be a word of warning for people who are thinking of doing this. So obviously I put that video up a little while ago, which was how you could get connectivity, Bluetooth connectivity in a CL500 with a tape deck, which was probably one of the worst ideas I've ever had. Doing it through a tape adapter, which was terrible. So I thought I would look for alternatives, and it's always a bad idea to be browsing eBay when you've had a few drinks, because you end up buying stuff which you probably regret in the morning. So I purchased this Android head unit which it said was for a CL500, but the problem is that it has a completely different form factor, and there are two versions of the CL500. There's the early version, which is what I've got, which has got a head unit with three separate kind of sections to it, which protrude through the center console, the wooden center console. And then there's a facelifted version which has a more standard kind of single aperture for a more updated head unit. And obviously this particular head unit the Android head unit was designed for the facelifted version. So there were two options really. Either I get this particular center console trim modified by cutting the walnut trim to fit, or I look for a center console from a facelifted CL500 and retrofit it into this one. And so I did a bit of searching around. There was a place in Sydney that had a facelifted center console for sale. So I purchased that, and one of the other things that changes with the facelifted version is what's called the upper control panel, which is this row of buttons across the top here, which has the rear blinds, park sensors, headrest control, central locking. Now a lot of these are toggle switches. Push the top to engage, bottom to disengage. And on the new upper control panel, they're single push button switches which toggle on and off. I thought it was going to be quite easy to just rewire the switches to work, but it actually turns out to be far more complex than that. So anyway, so the center console arrives. I managed to mount the Android head unit in there okay. After a bit of trial and effort with the connections at the back, I actually managed to get audio out of the device. I managed to get the steering wheel switches working on it. It's basically an Android device, so it has a bunch of apps that you can customize. So it's got Google Maps. It can connect to my iPhone in hotspot mode to get network connectivity. So everything was kind of working. That was a bit of trial and error because there was absolutely no documentation to speak of with this Android thing. I mean, there's a couple of pictures, I can show you those, but it was pretty hopeless. So I got it to work pretty much. The basics were working, but one thing that was weird is that the switches on the steering wheel had slightly strange effects. So when I was in the screen that deals with the mileage and fuel consumption and stuff like that, if I went up and down on that, it would actually change the channel on the radio, which was kind of not entirely a desirable side effect. I mean, the volume control worked, the phone switch worked. I mean, it all was linked into the CAN bus, and I'm going to do a video on CAN bus because I think it's quite interesting. I didn't understand it until I started looking into it, so stay tuned for that. But the real problem came when I tried to wire up the upper control panel, because the new one has different plugs, different plug shapes, different pin arrangements. Now, I spent hours, literally hours on the internet trying to find someone who'd done this before and who'd actually been able to retrofit the facelifted upper control panel back into an earlier version. And I couldn't find anyone who'd done it on a CL500. I had found someone who'd done it on a CLK, I think. So it was kind of similar. So there are 4 wires which are basically required for the CAN bus connection. All this is done through the CAN bus, so there's no physical, like there's no wiring between the switches and the actual appliances or the modules, the control modules. So there's no physical, actual specific wiring between the headrest switch and the headrest motors, actuators. So what happens is that it sends a coded digital signal on the CAN bus to that particular module, and that module responds to it. So 4 wires, there's positive and negative, then there's CAN bus signal high and low. It's kind of like it works in mirror format, so it's a kind of error correction or fault protection, fault tolerance system. So if one of the wires goes down, it'll still work. So eventually I was able to find which of those 4 connectors went into the back of the upper control panel, and the best I could get it to do was it would turn things on, but it would not turn things off again. So I could put the rear headrest down with a push of the button, because they're not toggles, they're just a single push. So in the new version, you push it once to put them down, push it twice, or push it again to put them up. So you push it once, it went down, you push it again, did nothing. The other issue is that the rear blind is on a separate circuit, so that didn't work at all. And in fact, I think the fuse is blown, so it doesn't actually work on this one. So if I press the headrest down, it's that one, they drop down, and then if I press the top, they raise back up again, which is kind of funky. But yeah, that wasn't working. So there was really no way I was going to be able to get this to work, because clearly the CAN bus signals which are generated from that upper control panel were different, and the actuators in the car were different to respond to those different signals. So that was going to be a real pain. It was never going to work properly. And so I think I kind of gave up at that point and thought, nah, this is not going to work. So what I've done is I've put it back completely to its original form. So everything's working as it should, except for the rear blind, which I think has actually probably got a fuse blown or something, because that's not working. Oh, there we go. It's a switch thing. All right, it's just a dodgy switch. So there we go. Yep, does work now. How funny. Oh no, it's not working. It's a dodgy switch. Look at that. You just have to push it really hard and then it will go up. So everything's working, which is great. But I'm back with the old head unit, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a suggestion that somebody made in one of the comments, and I'll have to look back on that comment to check what it is. But it's a Bluetooth adapter which actually fits into the phone cradle, allows Bluetooth connectivity through the existing hardware, the existing phone cradle in the center console here. So it was an interesting experiment, really interesting, because I learned a lot about how cars work. I learned a lot about the CAN bus, probably too much really. but yeah, it was really interesting. But it's a lesson that I assumed it was probably going to be too easy. It was going to be easy to rewire these things, and in fact, it's not easy at all. It's actually very, very complex. A lot of these cars nowadays, they're all digital. They basically have a network within them, like a computer network, which controls all the peripherals, accessories, or whatever you want to call it. So that's the moral of the story. Don't bite off too much, more than you can chew anyway. So I hope you've enjoyed this little cautionary tale. Thanks for watching. As always, don't forget to give the like a click if you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram at Maserati Guy 2017, and I'm on Facebook at Maserati Guy, and taking the Maserati in for some diagnostic work on that starting issue tomorrow morning. So I hope to put a video up about that very soon. Thanks very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.